hoping to take them at the next sitting of the Senate. So again, Mr. President, we're taking questions numbered 1, 2, and 4, but we're going to start with questions 2 and 4 as we're just sorting a technical issue in relation to question numbered 1.
So, Minister, I'm correct, President? I'm correct about the notice sent that the questions in respect to the Prime Minister's trips abroad are not going to be answered. Can we get an indication from the government, given the length of time that these short questions have been on the order paper, as to when I'll get answers to those?
So, President,
Leader,
just for the record, I repeat it in case...
Sorry, thank you, Senator Brown. Leader?
Yes, pardon me, Mr. President. In case Hansard missed it as well, I just indicated that the Minister is intends rather, to take them at the next sitting of the Senate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Reid.
I'd like to respond to question number 2.
Senator Reid. Senator Brown, you need to do something there.
Thank you. Mr. President, may I have answers to question number 2 on the other question paper standing in my name?
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Reid.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. In regards to the questions tabled and question number 2, where Senator Brown asked the following question, and we wish to respond. The question 1, is the Minister aware that the Industrial Disputes Tribunal, established under the Labor Relations and Industrial Disputes Act, has been represented by the Attorney General's chambers in court when there are challenges to the IDT awards? Answer: it is true that the IDT is usually represented by the AG when challenges to its awards are made to the Supreme Court. These challenges are by way of judicial review of the IDT's awards. It is also true that the AG's chambers has represented the IDT in appeals before the Privy Council. In every case, however, in which the Attorney General's chambers represent the IDT, whether at first instance or on an appeal to the Court of Appeal or the Privy Council, the Attorney General's chamber does so on the instruction of the IDT. The Attorney General's chamber cannot represent the IDT without the IDT instructing the Attorney General's chambers to do so. Question 2, part 2. Is the Minister aware that this representation was also at one time extended to appeals involving the IDT when taken to the level of our final appellate court, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in England? Answer: yes. The answer in respect of question, this question 2, part 1, applies to this question as well. Part 3, is the Minister aware that in at least 2 recent cases, University of Technology versus IDT, and another as well as the National Commercial Bank versus IDT, ex parte Jennings, in which the Attorney General's chambers successfully defended the IDT in the Jamaican Court of Appeal, chambers refused, declined, or otherwise failed to continue to represent the IDT when the cases were appealed to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council? Answer: it is certainly not true that the Attorney General's chamber refused, declined, or otherwise failed to continue to represent the IDT. In the 2 cases referred to, the IDT specifically informed the Attorney General's chambers that it did not wish to take part in the appeals to the Privy Council. Part 4, finally, question: If the answer to part 3 is in the affirmative, could the Minister please provide reasons for this departure from public policy whereby the Attorney General's Chambers represented the IDT in appease at the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council? Answer, not applicable. The answer to question 4 is not in the affirmative.
Mr. President, let me first thank the Minister.
Yes, Senator Brown.
Thank the Minister for his very sparse answer, but let me seek some clarification. Is the Minister saying to us that the Industrial Dispute Tribunal that handed down an award in favor of workers, having defended the award at the Supreme Court in the first judicial review and lost, and having challenged, certainly in the UTEC case, having challenged the judicial review decision from the Supreme Court in the Court of Appeal and won, that Industrial Dispute Tribunal refused to instruct the Privy Council, to AG, to represent it at the Privy Council when the employer took that case to the Privy Council? Is that what the Minister is saying to us?
Mr. President, I can only repeat the answer that I've already given, that in the case that was referred to, that there was no instruction given by the IDT to the Attorney General's Chambers.
Could the Minister, Mr. President, indicate to us whether the instructions not to go to the Privy Council was given by the IDT in writing? And if the answer to that is yes, when was those instructions given by the IDT not to go to the Privy Council to defend a decision of it that was upheld by the Court of Appeal of Jamaica?
Yes, Senator Reid, go ahead, respond, please.
Mr. President, my information is that in the case of the UTEC appeal, the instructions were in writing. And in the case of the other case, ex parte, yes. Sorry? I don't have that information before me. That's a specific time, the date when it was given.
The question, you are saying that the instructions were given in writing.
But he's unable to give us the date when that instruction was given. Is the Minister aware that this matter was heard, UTEC, on the 24th of January in the Privy Council, in which, Mr. President, the country can have access to the proceedings of the Privy Council, which is archived on the Privy Council website, where the 1 hour and 47 minutes of presentation by the council, by lawyer representing the intervener on behalf of UTEC and the Jamaica Employers Federation appeared. And the Privy Council requested that the government of Jamaica, representing the IDT, provide a response to it in respect to the argument. Is the Minister aware of that? And whether or not this failure to appear before the Privy Council is not an abdication of the responsibility of the IDT to defend its own award?
Mr. President, notwithstanding the position of the IDT in this matter, my information is that by virtue of subsequent developments alluded to by the Senator, the Attorney General's chambers has decided to appear at the Privy Council in amicus in its own right because it is a matter of interest to the government. So the Attorney General's chamber is now moving to have representation in the matter at the Privy Council.
Mr. President, again, because the presentation before the Privy Council is available to the public, it's on the Privy Council website, what the minister is saying to us doesn't ring well with what the 5 judges of the Privy Council was requesting. It is not no answer. You may be advising them, but I'm talking to the minister. I didn't know that you got.
But you don't have to be rude, Senator Brown.
I'm not being rude.
President.
I'm not being rude.
Sorry, 1 minute. Yes, Senator.
President.
Yes. Sorry, Lambert. Sorry, Senator Brown.
On a point of order.
Yes.
There is an inaccuracy. Now, I'm not saying it's a deliberate inaccuracy of how my friend, Senator Brown, is stating what the Privy Council said in terms of that they asked for the Attorney General's chambers to be involved. That's not quite how it was. So
let Senator Reid is responding. That's not really a point of order.
Very well. Because I saw it too. I sat down.
To be quite frank with you, Senator Golden, I watched it as well. Let's. Senator Brown, continue now, please.
Mr. President, I was not being rude, but I am aware of the proceedings of the Privy Council. And what I understand is that the Privy Council have said that they wish to hear. Mr. President, I don't want to interrupt Senator Bryan. So if he's on the floor, I will sit. But if you steal my permission, is still from you, I wish to continue, sir.
Senator Brown, continue, please.
Yes. That the Privy Council have asked that the government of Jamaica, the Attorney General's chamber, make submission to them. And what Senator Reid is saying to us, that it is the initiative of the Attorney General's chamber, is not true. It is the Privy Council. It's the Privy Council who have asked. And again I ask, how does this square, Senator Reid, with the Privy Council, with your response that the IDT have given instruction to the AG chamber not to go and represent them in the case. But now the AG department is going amicus as a friend of the court. Something is wrong, and we want to know why is it that the government has refused to represent the IDT. And if you're saying, Senator Reid, that the IDT has asked not to be represented, I want to know what is the mechanism at the IDT that allows it to take such a decision. Is it a collective decision? Is it a one-man decision? Is it a decision subject to the Minister of Labour? I want to know how the IDT can take a decision, or anybody at the IDT, not to go to the Privy Council to represent a case which it took to the Court of Appeal and won. That's what is strange. And I need some clarity on behalf of the workers in the BITU, the NW, the UIW, and the non-unionized workers of Jamaica. This is too important a matter.
I think the essence of the question, that we need to move on. Why is it the Attorney General's Department refused to represent the IDT? Is that the question that he's asked?
Mr. President, if I may, it appears from the answer that the IDT gave a positive instruction to the Attorney General's chambers not to represent them as a respondent in the appeal to the Privy Council when the matter was appealed by the losing party at the Court of Appeal. So there was a positive instruction not, this is what is even underlined in this answer, did not wish to take part in the appeals to the Privy Council. What Senator Brown is saying is that the Privy Council itself, looking at the matters before them, felt that it was necessary for them to adjudicate the case effectively, that the position of the IDT ought to be before them through counsel, and requested that submissions be made. I don't know whether it was in person or written submissions. And I think what the question that is being asked by Senator Brown is, does this not highlight a very unusual anomaly where the IDT has specifically asked, for whatever reason, and it seems extremely unusual to me that they would ask that their own victory in the Court of Appeal not be defended in the Privy Council where it's being challenged by the other side. But them having specifically, apparently, according to this answer, said they do not wish to be represented, the Attorney General's chambers is nonetheless acceding to a request from the
Senator
Privy
Golden,
Council.
you are rephrasing Senator Brown's question.
I'm clarifying it because it's not being answered. Yeah, it hasn't been answered yet because yes, I'm hoping that it will be answered.
So the question is what?
The question is it not very peculiar that they, having received a specific request according to this answer from the IDT that they do not wish to be represented at the Privy Council, that the Chambers is nonetheless providing a response in the form of submissions, whether in person or via written submissions, to the Privy Council in the case?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You understand the question, Senator Reid?
President, I'm really wondering if that's really a question or a statement.
Yes, it's a question. Is it peculiar that the IDT did not request representation from the Attorney General, A, and B, why is it that the Attorney General is now participating in the process?
The answer is negative, Mr. President. By virtue of the answers I provided is not peculiar, and as I indicated, the Attorney General's chambers has sought subsequently to appear in amicus.
Yeah, Mr. President, Senator Reid in his response said that Privy Council, given the importance of the questions to be answered at the Privy Council, which as I understand it, subject to Senator Brown's advice, is that a law passed in 1974 in the Parliament of Britain, is essentially the law of Jamaica, even though the British Parliament repealed that law. That essentially is the question before the Privy Council. Now, if Senator Reid has told us that that question is important to the industrial relations jurisprudence in the country, how can it be? I don't want to interrupt you. I don't want to be called rude by interrupting you. How can it be, Mr. President, that the Attorney General Department, having been told...
Senator Brown, with the greatest respect, I never called you rude because you interrupted him. I called you.
I never said
you were rude
I
either.
never said you called me
man,
rude because of that.
You never have to say that,
I am anticipating. I never said you did it. I'm just anticipating. Yeah. I'm just anticipating. It's consistent. Mr. President, if this question is so important that, according to Senator Reid, that the Attorney General of Jamaica is going to go as a friend of the Privy Council to respond to it, how comes the Attorney General Chambers and being instructed by the IDT that they don't want to be represented there, didn't advise? Because, as I understand it, the Attorney General Chamber is the lawyer for the Industrial Dispute Tribunal. And it would strike me that somewhere, and let me get it clear, Mr. President, I'm not playing politics here now. This is a matter that happened under the previous government. No, come on, just calm down. You know the story. We're not playing politics here. It happened under the previous government. So I don't want you to tell me that. My concern on behalf of the workers of Jamaica, and it's going to come up when I ask about Jennings' case, which is happening under this administration. How comes the Attorney General Chamber didn't see it as the lawyer for the Crown, as a lawyer for the Industrial Dispute Tribunal, not to advise them of the importance of the question to be answered in respect to what Justice Brooks had said is the authority of the Industrial Dispute Tribunal. And I want to know, therefore, whether or not the Attorney General Chamber sought to advise and counsel the Industrial Dispute Tribunal, who took such egregious decision not to defend their own victory at the Court of Appeal. I wish to know that, and then I have another question on the UT.
Mr. President, I would...
Did the Attorney General's Department seek to counsel the IDT? Can you answer that?
I do not have that information, Mr. President. So I would suggest that you can properly table that question and we will seek the answer and respond, but I don't have that information.
Mr. President, I'm quite willing to table more questions on this matter that is so important to the workers of Jamaica. In respect to this matter of the UTEC, and I wish to follow up on the Jennings issue. Mr. President, I wish the Minister to tell us whether or not there's a government policy where government entities are allowed to challenge another government entity at the Privy Council. Because if there is such a policy which allows for that, I'd like to recommend that such a policy no longer hold. If there's no such policy, I hope the Minister would join me in recommending to the government that there ought to be a policy which prevents one government entity whose final lawyer is the Attorney General from taking another government entity whose final lawyer is the Attorney General to the Privy Council. It makes no sense. Worse, given the cost of paying for two lawyers from the Attorney General's chamber to go to London to represent. So I want to answer. UTEC, which is
Mr.
under
President,
rule. Sorry, just UTEC, which is under rule, and the IDT, which is under the Minister of Labour.
You can go ahead. Can you go ahead, Senator Reid?
Mr. President, I invite my colleague Senator to properly table those questions and so we can research them and give an appropriate response.
I don't think the Minister understood the question, you know. It's whether or not you are aware of any government policy. You are the Minister of Information. Of any government policy which prohibits the people, one agency from taking the next agency of government to the Privy Council. That's essentially what I want, and whether you would agree with me if such a policy does not exist. Whether or not you would agree with me that such a policy is needed to prohibit that.
Mr. President, I repeat the previous answer given.
Mr. President, in respect to the second case in this matter, that's the case of NCB versus Jennings. And just to clarify something, Senator Bryan, there is no special leave that was required for the UTEC case. In the case of Jennings, I am not going to join, Mr. President, those who are saying that the Jennings case is not getting the support of the IDT, having won it through several cases in the Supreme Court and several cases in the Court of Appeal. That people out there are saying that this has to do with the IDT.
Senator Brown, you have a question on it. Just ask the question. You run up long, man.
Mr. President, I can understand your anticipation. I can understand your anticipation of the question.
You're starting in the pavilion. Come on.
Mr. President, there are people out there saying that the reason why Jennings is not being defended at the Privy Council is because who the other party is against the IDT. I don't share that view. And that is why I put the two cases together. But it is important. So I put the two cases together. to help you counter the view that the reason why the IDT is not defending Jennings' case is because of who it is against. And therefore, I wish to find out whether or not there's any policy. What is it that drives the IDT or the AG in not going to the Privy Council in defense of cases they have defended at the Court of Appeal and won? Because when the IDT was set up, it was to reduce costs. It was to reduce costs of the litigants. And what we find now is that poor people go to the IDT, win their case, but now are faced with an expensive trip to London to defend the case. And the government, which said to us, don't strike, go to the IDT, and we will have the IDT and the AG defend the case short. That covenant is now being breached. And the government is abandoning the workers and victories of the IDT. And I want to know what government policy can support such position. In other words, as the AG counsel the IDT that they are making a wrong decision not to pursue
already,
these cases.
You asked that question
No,
already.
this is in respect to Jennings. I separate the two cases, Queen's Counsel, you are aware that you mustn't ask questions that could give different answers.
Should I have said the thing to tell you what the question is? Because I just heard a long speech.
What he's asking you, the question is, Minister, whether there is a policy in relation to the second issue. He's looking at the wider question. Is there a policy existing presently where the AG's department counsels the IDT in matters where it is felt that representation should be provided by the Attorney General's department in order to defend matters that are before the courts? Correct, Senator Brown? Is there a policy?
Mr. President, I'm not aware if there is such a policy from either the past or the present. What I would assure the member, and as a past trade unionist myself, I would certainly want to support. Yes, still a trade unionist. Any policy that seeks to support the rights and interests of our workers as well as any citizen of Jamaica. So I'm committed to have further discussion with the Minister of Labour so we are clear what the policy is and the way forward.
Mr. President, I have a question for the Minister arising from this, and it's, if I may.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Minister Reid, my question for you is this, and it relates to how the costs of these appeals are borne. Where the IDT is faced with an appeal by the other party, the other side to the litigation, who has lost at the Court of Appeal and wishes to take the matter further, such as a large commercial bank, or in this instance, in the other case is another government-funded entity, which seems anomalous. But where that is the case, is it the IDT that is that bears costs related to the representation that it seeks at the Privy Council in London? In other words, are the costs that the Attorney General's chambers will incur in flying to London, staying in hotels, etc., are those costs borne by or charged back to the IDT so as to make costs an issue in the decision of the IDT whether or not to protect the judgment that it has from the court in defense of the rulings that it has made, in this instance, rulings that were in favor of workers? Or is that not a factor because the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General absorbs all of those costs? I wanted to understand that because it does appear strange that the IDT wouldn't be defending its own victories in the courts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President. Minister Golding, I will have the research. I want to get back to you in terms of actually who's bearing the cost. So we'll note that.
The question is whether the question you're going to research is who is responsible for the cost for the further appeal. Thank you. Senator Knight.
President, very interesting situation here. Would you be able to advise us as to the basis on which the Attorney General's chambers makes the decision not to defend a case such as the Jennings case at the Privy Council?
Or the IDT that make that decision.
If it is, or the UTEC case, and would you be able to tell us whose decision is it? Is it that of the Attorney General or that of the IDT? And on what basis could the IDT instruct the government's lawyer that there is not a case worth defending, having regard to the fact that the highest court territorial has decided in favor of the government entity? Because, President, it seems most strange. And on the issue of cost, is it not, could you find out, is it not possible for representation to be made by English counsel, thereby reducing costs, if cost is an issue?
Thank you, Senator Knight. Senator Reid, I recognize that a number of the answers were given prior to Senator Knight's arrival, but as a courtesy, I wouldn't have a problem if you were to just...
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In the instant case, the information we have is that the instructions were given by the IDT not to pursue the matter. And we will have to get further particulars as to what was the basis of that decision. In regards to part 2 of your submission, it's a policy issue whether you can have I think it's a good idea for the policymaker to look at whether you can have representation by English lawyers. Yes. So, so I can research further into the matter.
No further questions from me on this IDT matter, but I will take the advice of the minister and table further questions, because it's very interesting to know what is the system that prevails at the IDT that allows single individuals to say you're not pursuing a case that they want. Strange.
Mr. President, since we have closed this section for that particular question, may I now invite the Minister of Education, Youth and Information to provide answers to the question in my name and the question of the people. Question 4 to be specific.
Senator Reid, just before you respond to the questions moved by Senator Skeffrey, or mooted by Senator Skeffrey, I wish to take this opportunity to welcome, I think, almost 100 students from St. Mary's High School. Who have journeyed to spend the morning with us. I don't know if you know that Senator Floyd Morris here is a graduate. You all know Senator Morris? Not one Senator Morris. You need to, you need to do some more PR. Anyway, Senator Morris here is a graduate of the St. Mary's High School, so I think he's particularly happy to see you all here today. Welcome to the Senate, and I'm happy to see that you had a safe trip over. And please enjoy the proceedings today. We are at the position here now where Senator Reid, who is the Minister of Education, is answering some questions posed to him by another Senator Skeffrey over here. So you are just in time for those answers. Welcome, and please come back to the Senate at any time. Welcome to the students and teachers of the St. Mary High School. Senator Morris says that he's a guest speaker at your graduation this year, so make sure you all graduate.
I congratulate them on their discipline that was just displayed here today. When you, President, asked if anyone there knows Senator Morris, because they know they cannot answer, not one answer.
Senator Reid, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Question 1. Is the Minister aware that in the last 3 months, there has been a series of criminal attacks on students, resulting in at least one fatality? Answer: yes. As Minister, I have been regularly updated on matters relating to safety and security of students. 2, would the Minister indicate whether or not there is a department or unit within the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information which monitors or receives reports on such incidents or criminal attacks on our students, whether at the primary, secondary, or the tertiary level? Answer: matters of violence, critical incidents that take place within the schools are dealt with pursuant to the policy guidelines as directed in the Critical Incident Management Policy. Matters touching and concerning same must also be logged and the critical incident reports sent from the schools to central ministry through the various regions. These reports are thereafter treated with at the Safety and Security Unit. Matters that occur outside the schools are often reported directly to the police for their attention and later to the school for the appropriate actions. Incidents at the tertiary level are usually reported and the ministry provides support. The tertiary institutions, however, have their own internal processes to treat with issues at that level. Part 3, if the answer to question 2 is in the affirmative, would the Minister A, state the budgetary allocation to the department or unit for this financial year? Answer to part A, the budget allocated for the unit this financial year is 70 million Jamaican dollars. Part B question, state the staff complement of this department or unit. Answer, the Safety and Security Unit traditionally had one officer in the person of ASP Coleridge Minto, who has been seconded from the Jamaica Constabulary Force for the past 3 years. Given the nature of safety and security, and with it being one of the policy priorities of this minister and this administration, the complement of the staff has been increased to 4 since I became minister. C, state the number of such criminal attacks against our students reported so far this year. Answer, The available figures indicate that between January 2017 and April 2017, there were 7 such attacks. B, provide a breakdown of such criminal incidents by month and by institutions which the students attend. Answer. The minister can state that preliminary figures are indicating a downward trend within school violence, and this has been the case for the past 3 years. The number of incidents within schools are listed as critical incidents. This information is not usually made public, but can be provided directly to the senator outside of the Senate. As it relates to out-of-school violence, the police would be better able to provide this information. Question 4. If the answer to part 2 is in the negative, would the minister please state whether or not there are plans to establish such a department or unit, and if not, would the minister please state the reason? There is, as mentioned, a unit in place which has been given both additional resources in terms of increase from $30 million to $7 million, over 100% increase, and moving from 1 person to now 4 persons in the unit. Again, this is a policy priority area for the ministry. Would the minister indicate, question 5, if during this year there has been any prosecution leading to the conviction of any person for committing a crime of violence against any student? Answer, I have not personally followed up with the police investigations or any specific prosecution on any matter. That is not generally a matter that would come in any form of report.
Mr. President.
Sorry, Senator Skefford, just if you look at answer 4, Minister, I think that figure should be 4 persons, not 5. Is that a typo?
Yeah, yeah, we have added somebody. Right, yeah, somebody, okay. There's actually somebody who has been added recently. So,
okay, thank you. Senator Skefford.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me thank the Minister for finally answering these questions that were tabled quite a while and fell off the order paper and was retabled. But I just want to seek some clarifications and some supporting questions to further highlight the issues. As you know, Mr. President, it's a very critical issue, violence among our children in school and in the communities generally. And we have a number of incidents over recent times, from the Cumberland situation with student and teacher, the situation with the young lady from William Nib. We saw students being attacked by some ladies in Maypens, and then we disseminated from the JC incident and so on. I want to first go to question 3, part D, Mr. President. The answer given to the question for the breakdown, month by month and institution by institution. I'm not satisfied with the answer given that you normally make these data public. I'm not asking for the specific names of the students that were attacked, but the police, for example, give you on a periodic basis the various categories of criminal activities. So I'm asking the minister for us to be clear as to the nature of these activities against our children. What are the reports given? So I don't think it's a private matter between myself and the minister, while I accept him want to provide information for me directly. But I didn't ask the question necessarily for Skefford's purpose, but to have my colleagues, all 21 of us, and the public in general. So I don't understand. I wanted to clarify the policy that seeks to make this particular information private when there are violence acts generally that the police report, murder, rape, and so on, Mr. President, as you know. Also, he spoke about the trend, the figure trending down. Now I want the evidence to support that, because just to tell me that it is, I want to analyze it for myself, and the data that I asked for would put me in a position to so do. So I want the minister to clarify more so what policy prevents him from providing this data when the police force generally provide that for the entire nation. So is it that the ministry has something that they want to hide? So I want to seek clarification on that particular question first, and then I'll have some other questions as I move on.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, Senator Reid, thank you.
President. Our senator is very aware, because the question that you raised actually says, provide a breakdown of such criminal attack by month and by institutions which the students attend. Mr. President, this data has never been made public. Never been made public. Never been made public by any administration. No. What I'm saying is it has never been made public. That's a policy. No. I'd like to further indicate, Mr. President, the question was asked about evidence in terms of trend. In regards to the issue of our children being victims of serious violence, in regards to murder, there was, in fact, 64 murders of our children recorded in 2011, 43 in 2012, 50 in 2013, 45 in 2014, 61 in 2015.
Mr. President.
And
Mr. President.
And
Mr. President.
41 in 2016.
Let him finish now, please.
No, point of order.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I didn't know, sorry.
But you should say point.
No, man, I said Mr. President, attention first.
No, I was distracted. I'm sorry, Senator Skeffrey. Sorry, Senator.
The minister is now providing the data. So it's clear that there's no rigidity in any policy. And I think out of respect for the person who asked the question, then I should have the data in writing. That's what I asked for.
That's not a point of order, really, you know.
No, I seek some clarification, Mr. President, because the question is not being
so
answered properly.
You want the data?
I have not gotten adequate answers. Mr. President, please, allow me. I have not gotten adequate answers to the question. And in writing, the minister stated that the answers cannot be made public as a policy just a few seconds ago. And sitting right there, he has revised the policy and not providing the data. I think out of respect for the person asking the question, yours truly, and my colleagues, then provide the answers as comprehensive as I have asked. Because he has the data there. So if it's a policy, why breaching his own policy without seeking cabinet's permission?
So that's not really a point of order anyway, but you are seeking some clarification. No, because you said point of order, you know. Don't make Lambert, don't make Senator Brown lead you astray, you know. Senator Reid, you need to just deal with it.
I tried to
succinctly, please.
I was trying, Senator Skeffrey, to make the point, the distinction, and I have not changed any policy. The issue, and I'm saying, Senator, and I'm saying that it is the issue of the breakdown per institution that I'm talking about. And the information I gave a while ago, it is not by institution. It is by category.
Well, Mr. President, I hope that the minister will probably give some supplementary answers in the future. But so you can't tell me that the thing is trending downwards and I have nothing to look at. Let's just ensure that we provide a level of transparency as we go forward. Let me also say to the minister, since we have this particular unit, safety and security unit within the ministry, what are the specific strategies that this unit is using to deal with the violent issues and acts within our educational institution?
Mr. President, there's a time when we didn't even have, a matter of fact, when I was JTA president, the only thing we had really in schools were watchmen. And I remember at the time, I had said to the then minister, we need a security and safety strategy. And subsequent to then, when current Prime Minister was Education Minister, we were the ones who developed the safety and security strategy, and we developed a safety and security manual. We started the process of regularizing deans of discipline in school. And all of these matters, Mr. President, are a raft of strategy to ensure that, first of all, there's a culture of understanding how to manage safety and security, because there are several facets for safety and security. You're talking about preventing intruders on one hand, so you have to ensure you secure your premises. That was very important. We introduced things such as metal detectors to prevent students and other persons from bringing weapons onto the campus. Regularly spot checking and checking students, developing a system-wide culture of discipline within the school, ensuring that there is a strong disciplinary culture within the schools. Matter of fact, we have trained over 1,000. He's asking about strategies. You're asking questions you don't want me to answer.
Senator Reid, just continue, please.
Yeah, we have trained, since I have been minister, over 1,000 school personnel in the matter of safety and security and other disciplinary measures. We have, through the CAP program, trained 400 persons to be deployed, particularly in the primary school, because of the fact that they don't have the kind of budget to support the safety and security initiative. And I could go on to talk about the massive increase in funding we have provided for the high school system so that they have the kind of resources to provide the security staff to ensure we deal with safety and security. So, and finally, Mr. President, I'd like to say to the Senator, if you check among the 6 priorities that this administration has set for the Ministry of Education, safety and security is the #1 priority.
Yeah, Mr. President, the minister seems to be campaigning. However, it's a serious national issue.
No, with the greatest of respect,
No.
that's not necessary, man.
Yeah,
You
man,
ask him a question and him respond to it.
I'm not standing out, Mr. President, so I've said it. The issue, the number of schools that are now confronted with the specific issue of violence in the school. I want you now to tell me how many of those schools are having the metal detectors that you spoke to? How is the effectiveness of the dean of discipline and the school resource officers in those schools? So how are the strategies working to reduce the incident of violence in these schools? For example, we have schools where the first call of duty is to send the principal on pre-retirement leave to deal with the issue. Those schools, are they currently having a dean of discipline, a metal detector? So is it that the strategies are not working in a holistic way, or just within some particular school, or is it not working at all?
Mr. President, there was a particular report of an incident between an administrator of an institution and a student, where in the incident report, in the attempt for the administrator to bring some amount of order and discipline, from the account, there was an argument about the use of corporal punishment. So, Mr. President, when I hear the senator alluding to issues of safety and security, that was not an issue of safety and security. That was not an issue about the lack thereof of a metal detector. So I would like to know, frankly, if you could just state for me, Mr. President, which school, because certainly if he's referring to Cumberland, as I've heard last week he referred to. The issue with Cumberland was not safety and security issue in the general sense.
Senator Reid.
That's what it's very issue.
Senator Reid, I got the impression, sorry, Senator Scarfer, I got the impression that the senator was inviting you to make a statement on how successful your strategies are.
Don't interrupt my questions. I can speak. But okay. But what I'm saying, Mr. President.
Specifically about Cumberland?
No. What the minister spoke, the minister raised the issue of the metal detector. I did not. As one strategy to deal with the issue that we're discussing. So I'm asked, and there are issues of discipline, violence in schools. Let's not hide that fact. So I'm asking the minister, and as you said, in terms of the effectiveness of the strategy, and I agree with you, Mr. President. So the point I'm saying, you have the metal detectors, are they working? How many schools have them? The effectiveness of the dean of discipline that he mentioned, I'm merely following up. How effective is that initiative that came into being some time ago? In addition to that, many schools have what is called a school resource officer, a police that links with the school, the community to deal with the issue of violence, generally with students whether in the schools or in the community. So if we have these strategies, it's not just to have them, but at specific times, Mr. President, there has to be an assessment as to the effectiveness with a view to strengthen or transform aspect of the strategy for it to continue to achieve the stated objective. So as the minister done an assessment of those broad strategies, and if they are working, of course, you'll keep those aspects. Those that are not working, what are the new strategies that he will do as he revise it, as we seek solutions to the problem? And I'm not here to make an issue about security and safety. All of us here have children directly or indirectly. So it's an issue that confronts all of us, and we want to ensure that the strategies are effective. So what are the assessment strategies that he has employed to deal with the issue for it to be sustainable?
Senator Reid, and after the Senate, you can clarify for me what you mean by all of us have children directly and indirectly.
I've adopted many.
Senator Reid, go ahead, please.
Those what they call outside.
Mr. President, I want to assure the Senate and members of the public that we have not seen, and in certain experiences I've had, I think we have to make sure we are very clear in terms of incidents that occur outside of our schools on their way home, and incidents happen within school. And I'm not aware, Senator Scarfer, that there has been any major issues of violence within school, the compound of school. But if you want to, for me to give you further evidence, Mr. President, I want to refer to a base year of 2012 versus 2016. There were 915 fights recorded in 2012. In 2016, 16. There are 23 robberies recorded in 2012, 14 2016. Theft, 160, 2012, 45, 2016. 52 wounding, 2012, 16, 2016. 915 knives found, 2012, 110, 2016. 486 scissors found,
Just a clarification, Mr. President. Just a
74,
clarification.
2016.
Could we find out what...
Sorry, 1 minute.
Just a clarification. Yeah. What is the minister reading from so we may be able to check and to look at it? Because since the minister is reluctant to share with the Senate and the public data inside the Ministry of Education, we'd just like to know the source so we could check it. So if we must ask follow-up question, we avoid asking it because we can go and check the source.
Senator Reid, the source of your script.
Mr. President, the question was posed as to whether there was a unit in the Ministry of Education that deals with safety and security. And in the affirmative, the data I am speaking to arise from data that comes from the the Safety and Security Unit, which, as I alluded to, is part of the system where the schools have to report the data to the ministry. But I also mentioned that the incidents that occur outside of the school are largely the domain of the police force. And so we also try to get information from the constabulary force about such incidents. So this is just really a collation of the data from those main sources, Mr. President.
Yep.
President, just a question.
Yes, Senator Nye.
Having regard to your identification of years, 2 years in particular, 2012, which from my recollection, and I may be wrong, that was the start of the tenure of the last administration. And the 2016 was the end of the tenure of the last administration. Am I correct that having regard to the statistics in 2012 and the statistics at the end of 2016, there was a massive reduction in several of the offenses you have referred to? And would you ascribe that to policies that were in place? And if the answer is yes, are such policies being continued? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Nye.
You're
Senator
correct.
Reid.
The Safety and Security Manual was introduced prior administration, not your administration, Minister Holness. It continued with Minister Thwaites. In fact, Minister Thwaites and I always had this view: we don't politicize education, and much of the policies were continued, and the safety and security policy was continued. Indeed, the senator asked a question about a safety and security unit. He, who served the Ministry of Education, well knew that there was a safety and security unit. Affirmative. I agree. I said in affirmative. And you're a lawyer, you should know better than that.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
The
President didn't hear that.
the senator,
Didn't hear the rudeness from the minister.
the senator made a comment that I should know better than that. I don't know what that is. So please tell me what is that. I asked, please tell me what is that. You, as a former headmaster, you should be able to answer that.
The senator is really indicating that he thought your response to him was a bit sharp. But I know you sufficiently to know, just like I know Senator Brown, that you never intended any offense from him.
Mr. President, my good friend and colleague knew that that is not what I did say. In fact, it was not to you. I said, no. Yes, but I'm saying Senator Skeffrey served at the Ministry of Education. And he knew that there was a safety and security.
Mr. President, point out, with due respect. I wear many caps. I served in the Ministry of Education. I am now in the Senate. I'm asking questions.
But that's not a point about. No, you said point about.
No,
and
but
you
the
shift now
minister
to
is attacking, getting personal, you're not protecting me. Where the minister served previously is irrelevant to the questions I'm asking.
Thank you, Senator Reid.
If he has the answer, provide them. If he doesn't, fine.
Thank you, Senator Reid. The senator is asking you to answer the question without getting personal.
Mr. President, question 1 in question number 4 was about whether the minister is aware that in the last 6 months there have been a series of criminal attacks on students, resulting, no, 6 months, resulting in at least one fatality. Mr. President, as a senator, we are called to training and orientation. We're told to make questions short. But that is not to mean that ministers are to come and give single word answer. Because the purpose of the questions are to get a sense of what's happening, policy direction, and one would expect, because maybe we're going to have to write long 43 questions. No. Following from that.
You have a question here?
Yes, I have a question. I put that because the one-word answers does not do justice to the search for information, which is what these questions are intended for. And in this respect, Mr. President, because it spoke about 3 months or whatever, I recall as a senator, a student from the school you and I attended being killed because the ministers narrowed the answers to inside the schools. But when I send my child to school, or anybody send their children to school, they are concerned from the moment the child leaves the house, to the bus stop, to the school, and back after school. The youngster from Jamaica College killed for a cell phone. Student from Calabar recently, there are shots fired outside the gate of the school. We recall the Montego Bay incident, downtown Montego Bay. Students from Antrovey High on a bus going to school, shot up. I didn't say Addo. Shot up in Antrovey. There are the cases where here schools invaded at Eltham. These questions are designed to get from the minister a response to a national crisis. That a one word, yes, I am aware, is not enough. I am aware and what I am doing to solve it. Because I'm getting the impression, Mr. President, and I wish the minister to tell me, since he is addressing inside the school, whether or not the trend is going in the opposite direction, outside the school, that more incidents are taking place against our students when they leave the school compound or on their way to the school compound. Could the minister give us a sense of what's happening there? Because I'm beginning to feel like the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security, that when the media report these things, they really are reporting fake news. Unless the minister tells me otherwise.
What I would say respectfully, Mr. President, is that if you look at the question 1 that Senator has so pontificated, the question is the minister aware that in the last 3 months there have been a series of criminal attacks on students resulting in at least one fatality? Let me repeat the question. The question was tabled. Is the minister aware that in the last 3 months...
On a point of order, Mr. President, just to clarify, the question I read
You can't say a point of order just to clarify.
No,
a point of order is a point of order. What is the point of order?
The minister is not answering the question asked because the question, as I understand it, let me finish. The question says 6 months. The minister has sought to change the 6 months in the question to 3 months in his answer. And he's therefore not answering the question asked, and that is
Minister,
a breach of the standing order.
The point of order is that you are not answering the question. So, you need to just respond and let's move on.
and I concede that a typo, this should have really been 6 months, but that doesn't change the answer. Your contention, his contention, as I understood it, Mr. President, was the succinctness of the answer. And I'm saying how the question was framed, I don't think you would have gotten. So my suggestion, if you want more expansive answers, you should structure the question for the answer that you seek.
Okay, Mr. President, may I have a follow-up question to that? Having been aware, what steps have you taken now as the Minister of Education and, more important, the Minister of Information, the government has taken to deal with the issue of violence against our students within our communities? Outside the school, within our communities. Having been aware, what are the steps taken so far to deal with the issue within the society generally? Then?
What steps is the Minister of Education taking to deal with the safety of students within the community, that is to say, outside of the schools?
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
So when you say your run-up, sometimes the end result is you spin your spin.
Mr. President, the first thing we did, and we have stakeholders. We have been working assiduously with the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, and to sensitize and to work to make sure, along with the constabulary force, to make sure that there is strong security for students, particularly as they traverse our streets, going to and from school. If you recall, in the instant case with the JC matter, we instituted a dedicated bus on the route from Papine to Halfway Tree, and we placed security not only on that route, but from the Calabar side all the way to downtown, etc. And that program continues. So as far as we're concerned, we have sensitized our school population and our stakeholders that the safety and security of our students are indeed a priority. And no doubt you would have heard the announcement and discussion that we are having in regards to rolling out a comprehensive national school bus system. And that also is a major safety initiative to make sure our particular vulnerable children are properly transported, taken, particularly as close to their homes as possible through dedicated transportation to school and from school back to home. So this government, being a caring government, is trying to work over time to make sure we do all that is humanly possible for the safety and security of our prized possessors, the children of Jamaica.
In this respect, Mr. President, I'd like to ask the Minister, what is being done to protect the teachers in the schools? There have been cases recently of teacher had to pull firearm. There are cases where a teacher car has been damaged. There have been cases where parents have attended the school with a view to do serious damage to teachers. What measures are in place, apart from firing principals, to protect the teachers who are being under attack in the schools?
Mr. President, the staff in our institution are just as valuable as our students, and we try to make our schools safe, not only for our students, but equally for our staff members. The initiatives I mentioned before in terms of the overall culture of safety and security are also applicable for staff. What I would like to say to my good friend, Senator Lambert Brown, who should know much better than that there are specific cases you can't draw generalization from it because you keep referring to certain attacks on, and I really don't want to go into the specifics of some of these cases either, because many of them you have to look at the antecedents that sometimes, what I would comment on, and I would be saying this to my practitioners, that you have to be very emotionally intelligent and very careful very often how you intervene and deal with student matters, because there are many instances where we have investigated where what has been accused are assault and students reacting. So there are some social issues we're going to have to deal with in terms of what we now seen is where an attempt to discipline students themselves, they themselves might retaliate. Some of them complain that the teachers hit them first and they retaliate, and that led. So if you're going to talk, for example, about the Cumberland case, which I didn't want to get into, there's another side to that particular case. So we have to be very careful how when we see a report of incident. You mentioned even the case of William Knibb. Before I talk about Lightburn, William Knibb. And what has not really been reported is the altercation between and how the teacher in the incident case handled the student in an aggravated manner that eventually led to that particular outcome. Right? So we need to be very careful about these incidents. All of us will have to learn from it. It's very difficult to manage discipline in school. What I would say in conclusion, having raised the question, I'm happy you asked the question, but I saw, Mr. President, an article, a letter, rather, written in the papers this week, speaking, and I thought that I was going to read it this morning, but I don't have enough time, that it's complaining how indisciplined we have become as a society. And so us as senators must not, give an impression that the discipline and indiscipline that we experience in our schools is also a reflection of what is coming out of our homes and our communities. The safety and security we're talking about and the criminality is also part of who we have become as a society. So perhaps I look forward to Senator Sceffrey proposing a joint select committee for us now to see how we're going to work together. We're going to work together to rebuild the culture of Jamaica when manners and discipline was part of the cultural fabric of our nation.
Mr. President, having heard the minister, I still have not had an answer to the question, what measures are being taken to protect the teachers? As a past president of the JTA and as a vice president of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, in which the JTA is a member, the workers and the trade unions want to know what protection exists for the teachers.
Thank you,
and I hope the minister can give us an answer to that.
Senator Reid, you're not listening to the question, What steps are being taken to protect the teachers in the schools? Could we have a response to that?
Mr. President, it is not true that I'm not listening to the question, sir. Because I answered the question to say that the measures, Mr. President, I said so, my answer. The measures that apply to the safety and security of our schools in total, because the school is made up of both students and staff. You can't separate the two. So if you're securing, Mr. President, the premises of the school, the structures that we have, the SRO, the security guards that we have, I didn't even mention the CCTV camera, and I'm rolling out that. We're trying to encourage all the schools to have that. Sorry? The school resource officers, the policemen who are assigned to schools. The panic buttons that are implemented in our schools. All the
the metal detectors that I alluded to earlier, that you are using to check persons who are entering your campus, right? To ensure that all who enter therein, all who operate therein, from student to staff, are safe, feel safe, and are well protected.
Okay, Mr. President, what I hear the minister
Senator
telling...
Skeffrey, you're going to ask a question again,
Yeah,
or you're moving on here now?
No, I'm going to ask a question. But what I hear the minister saying is that there's no specific strategy for my colleagues in the classroom, and it's really one cap fits all. Question 5, Mr. President. Question 5 and the answer that you gave there. I didn't intend for you to personally follow up cases of prosecution leading to conviction. I wouldn't expect a minister to do that. But if you admit that there's a security and safety unit, though it wouldn't be their primary function, all of us, Mr. President, would have an interest that when there are attacks against our students, whether in the schools or in the community, then it leads to successful conviction, because ultimately that will be what will deter others from wanting to commit acts of violence against our students. So, Mr. President, I am not satisfied with that answer, and I will ask the minister, perhaps at a later date, to ask a specific unit to liaise with the, because this is a system, you know. If you have students, school resource officer, because the minister is giving us the bits and pieces, but if you have a school resource officer that links with the school, then we can always, and the dean of discipline, then we can have a comprehensive system to give us an idea, because the more we have the conviction, and I don't want to believe that we have these acts taking place and there's no conviction, as we are witnessing our system. So I'd like to have a more comprehensive answer to this question.
Minister, you are being asked to provide in the future a more comprehensive response to...
And question 3, that brought $70 million, Mr. President. I'd like to ask the minister to probably give us an idea as to what percentage goes towards administrative work as against what percentage actually goes towards intervention. Because until we can properly intervene into the issues or the causes, that's when we really have real solution. Oftentimes we have units or departments, and majority of the resources goes towards administrative work, though important, but sometimes the intervention, which is critical to solve the problem, is always left behind. So what percentage of the 70 million on an annual basis, or for this financial year, will go towards intervention programs to enhance the capacity of those staff, support staff and direct staff, and find intervention programs in the schools to ease this issue affecting our children?
Thank you, Senator Skeffrey. Senator Reid, a breakdown of the 70 million.
Mr. President, I'll answer the question this way to enlighten the Senator that the question related to a unit, and the unit have particular terms of reference. All the resources to deal with safety and security is not within that particular unit. Because, for example, Dean of Discipline, SROs, would not be funded from the $70 million. The resources for ICC or CCC camera, etc., are not funded. Schools themselves have their own resources that they utilize for safety and security. However, in terms of some of the central programs that we have out of the ministry, out of the $70 million that we mentioned in terms of actual resources that we put to schools, I think that would be about 50 million out of the 70 million would be allocated to actual resources within the schools.
Thank you, Senator Reid. I think that, Leader, is it intended to answer the questions that we were just... Okay, can I move on to...
Yes,
the question
Mr. President,
no, 1 minute, please. Yeah, thank you,
So,
thank you. But can I move on? Any other follow-ups for Senator Reid? Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Go ahead. Senator Brown?
Mr. Mr. President, apparently the answers are just circulated. I'm just seeing it. But may I receive answer to the very long outstanding question in respect to the British £360 million grant to the Caribbean, and what steps we have taken to receive any of that grant?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator Brown. Go ahead, please, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first question was, is the Minister aware that whilst addressing a joint sitting of the Jamaican Parliament in September 2015, the then United Kingdom Prime Minister, Honourable David Cameron, announced a package of grants to the Caribbean countries amounting to £360 million for infrastructure development aimed at achieving growth, prosperity and reducing poverty in Jamaica and other Caribbean countries? Answer. There is no package of grants amounting to $360 million for infrastructure development. We are, however, aware of packages announced in respect of infrastructure for the Caribbean, which amount to £330 million. The remainder relates to public and private sector development support. For clarity, the following, and I've tried to provide full answers in so much as possible, especially as they were outstanding for a while. For clarity, the following comprise the elements of the announced infrastructure grant funding available to Jamaica, together with other Caribbean countries which are eligible for UK overseas development assistance. £300 million for the United Kingdom Caribbean Infrastructure Partnership Fund, the UK CIPF, the aim of which is to promote sustainable economic growth in 8 selected Caribbean countries, including Jamaica. The fund is managed between the UK Department for International Development, DFID, and the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB. 18.8% of the fund, approximately £53 million, has been allocated to Jamaica, and the project duration is scheduled for 2015 to 2020. In addition, Mr. President, £30 million to strengthen infrastructure of health facilities across the Caribbean so that they are more environmentally friendly and structurally resistant to natural disasters such as hurricanes. The funds are administered by the Pan American Health Organization, and no specific amount has been allocated to Jamaica. This will support, Mr. President, the Smart Healthcare Facilities Program, the pilot for which had an initial programmed amount of £8.2 million, and the project duration is 2015 to 2020. Mr. President, question 2 says, if the answer to 1 above is in the affirmative, would the Minister please indicate what steps, if any, have been taken by Jamaica to procure any portion of this £360 million grant since the offer was made? And notwithstanding the inaccuracies in the question, Mr. President, which would have led to my simply saying it's not in the affirmative and simply not providing information. I've tried to provide you what you wanted. No, also for infrastructure, yeah? In respect of the UK, because you do recognize that's an inaccuracy anyway. In respect of the UK CIPF, Jamaica has submitted projects for consideration in keeping with the criteria and priorities established by the fund. These projects have been assessed for submission by the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, as well as the PIOJ for alignment with the criteria established by the administrators of the fund. More particularly, the projects to benefit under the fund must meet certain criteria, including the demonstration of an economic rate of return of at least 12% and strong evidence of being critical to driving economic development. I have attached as Appendix 1 the criteria set out in the published information brochure. Mr. President, in respect of health facilities, the Ministry of Health is working with PAHO on the commencement of a smart audit assessment of clinics across the island. 100 facilities are to be assessed in the first instance, and to date, health and safety impact, HSI, and green checklist assessments have been conducted on 35 facilities, including facilities in St. Andrew, Greater Portmore, St. Thomas, St. Anne's Bay, Manchester, Portland, and St. Elizabeth. 3, would the Minister please provide information on the specifics of each initiative taken to procure any benefit under this £360 million grant? Again, despite the particular question, please refer to answers given to question 2. Furthermore, please note that under the UK CIPF, the Essex Valley Irrigation Project was formally approved by the board of the CDB in March 2017. There is also provisional acceptance by the CDB of another irrigation project in respect of which the CDB has fielded a mission to the proposed project sites, in respect of which the GOJ is, of course, working with them. Some details are provided on the Essex Valley Irrigation Project, indicating that a grant of £35.5 million was recently approved by the UK SIF CDB for the Essex Valley Irrigation Project, aimed at developing an irrigation system with accompanying agricultural support infrastructure for 700 hectares of agricultural land in St. Elizabeth. The project is intended to reduce the water-related challenges faced by farmers in Essex Valley and enhance agricultural production and productivity. The project is scheduled to be launched in late 2017. Would the Minister, question 4, would the Minister please indicate whether or not among the steps taken to procure benefit under this £360 million grant, there was an initiative by the Ministry of Education in December 2015 to procure support for the building of a secondary school in the parish of St. Anne? Answer, we are aware that the then Minister of Education had approached the UK SIF informally about the possibility of funding the construction of schools under the UK SIF. The priorities established for the UK SIF, however, do not include social infrastructure projects. Please see extract from the UK SIF information brochure, again attached at Appendix 1.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator Brown.
I thank the Minister for the answers, but we need some clarification. Let me start with the first point, that there's a requirement I'm seeing for 12% return on investment. But that seems, Mr. President, to conflict with what I heard when I sat over there and the Prime Minister of Britain was here. No, he was somewhere, I believe, on your chair. This is what I heard him to say. Let me be clear. This 300 million is not soft loans, not tied aid. It is cash grants. It is up to you in this room and in the region to decide how best to spend it on the things that your country needs most. I am confident that this support will make a decisive difference to the economic future of the region. That's what he said. Am I to understand that the Prime Minister's words to this Parliament, to this Honourable House of Representatives, Joint House of Representatives and Senate, are not being adhered to by new conditions being inserted subsequent to the speech? Is that what I'm being told?
Mr. President, it would be quite clear that when the then Prime Minister of the United Kingdom made an announcement, he would not have announced all of the details for the administration of a fund. He would have announced the headline amount being allocated within their budgetary provisions for allocation. It would have fallen thereafter to appropriate administrators within the Caribbean, decided here to have been between DFID, the Department for Infrastructure Development, and the Caribbean Development Bank, who are the partners who work on the administration of the fund, to establish the criteria which they agreed would be used in assessment of project applications. And that is what was done.
Again, Mr. President, I must take Prime Minister's words seriously. When the Prime Minister said these things to us, some of us actually applauded. Now we're being told that some agencies, Caribbean Development Bank, the Jamaica representative on it in the negotiations, negotiated a different set of things from what the Prime Minister said. If I may borrow the word of the President of another place, this is a very bad deal if we're going to insert in grants money for us to decide how we use a 12% return on investment. So, who the Jamaica representative on the negotiating team? That's the question I want to ask first.
I'm not aware of any negotiating team, Mr. President. The Senator seems to be sort of building some sort of new narrative. Or, I'm not aware of any negotiating team. And I'm not sure if the senator is suggesting that the Prime Minister, when he made the announcement, should have just had a plane load of cash and throw it out of the window and say, you know, the fact is that there must be administrative processes. And there were two bodies. There is the Department of Infrastructure for International Development, which is a well-known organization that works with all of the countries in the Caribbean and elsewhere very effectively and has done so over the years, which together with the Caribbean Development Bank worked on a series of criteria which they would use in administering the fund, which would have, the money for which would have been provided by the UK government. And I'm not seeing anything untoward. There's nothing, I think, that begs further questions or suggestion of any ill will or bad faith. These are sound management principles which should surround any large allocation of funding to be allocated across a number of islands with different needs and interests.
Mr. President, I understand the minister not understanding, but don't blame me for that. She said to us, Mr. President, she said to us, the minister sitting over there said to us.
Point of order.
The minister sitting over there said to us.
Mr. President, really no. Really no. Can we just ask for a particular level of conduct and probity, proper behavior? You're not seeing him behind you. You're not seeing behind you, so don't defend what you're not.
Senator Brown, just continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. The minister sitting there, while she was standing, said that the Prime Minister of Britain, David Cameron, having made this announcement to the Jamaican Parliament, that is that shabby intended to be for me? Is that shabby intended to be for me? Mr. President, let me continue. Let me continue. What is clear to me is that the minister sitting there, while she was standing, said that having made the announcement, the CDB, Caribbean Development Bank, and DVID met to work out the terms of the grant. If two parties are meeting to work out the terms of the grant, that must include negotiations. And I'm asking whether or not Jamaica, with representative and CDB, are there anybody in that negotiating team working through the terms and conditions for what was supposed to be not soft loans, not tied aids, cash grants, in which the Prime Minister said, it is up to you in this room and in the region to decide how best to spend it. And so what I'm trying to get is, did Jamaica have anybody in Caribbean Development Bank in those negotiations who would have made it clear that a 12% return on investment to get a grant is an unfair demand? So I'm trying to get, before I proceed with the other questions which I have on this issue.
I'm not aware of any specific Jamaican representative on the team that would have looked at the criteria for dispersing funds under the grant allocation.
In determining that, could the minister indicate to us who determined that 18.8% of the fund, in Jamaican dollar, approximately 8.5 billion out of approximately 60 billion Jamaican dollars, would be provided to Jamaica? Could we indicate who determined the split and how was the split determined?
I'm unable to answer. I think that is not a process that was transparent to Jamaica. I'm not sure if it was at the level of the UK government or if it was at the level of DFID or it was otherwise allocated as determined between DFID and CDB. I'm not clear, sir.
I take it, Mr. President, that the minister is satisfied and the government is satisfied with the allocation. I'm not quarreling about it. I just want to know if they're satisfied with the 18.8% of it, the 8.5 billion Jamaican dollars that has been allocated to us. Is the government satisfied, or has the government sought to get more?
It's not a question of satisfaction, Mr. President. It is what was allocated.
Would the minister agree with me that this 330 billion, almost 330 million pounds, almost 60 billion Jamaican dollars, did not include a gift for a prison or any assistance with a prison? I just want to be clear that this 330 billion plus the 30 billion more, which make up the 336, that was part of the grant. This is separate and apart from any prison deal. I just want to be clear on that.
Yes, it's entirely separate.
And the government doesn't find that anything in this grant is bad for Jamaica's best interests. I assume so. Mr. President, we ask, could I find out whether or not a unit has been set up to pursue, within the government, to pursue this 8.5 billion Jamaican dollars, to work on projects and programs that will allow us to maximize the 8.5 billion. It's almost half of the tax package, more than half of the tax package imposed on the Jamaican people. Is there a unit set up to aggressively go after this grant?
The first thing I just wish to clarify again, because the Senator keeps repeating the headline figure, and the amount has been allocated across the Caribbean. In fact, the 300 is specifically across 8 identified Caribbean islands that are eligible for ODA. It's not an entire fund that's been allocated to Jamaica. In respect of dealing with funds that are provided internationally, the PIOJ has its own unit that addresses how those matters are are treated with, in terms of the projects, feasibility, how they are managed, administered, the project writing, etc. They support ministries in respect of, they circulate information to the relevant ministries that might have an interest in the particular project or the allocated funds. And those are the infrastructures which are being used together with, as I've indicated in here, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Mr. President, I'm not highlighting the 360 for Jamaica. I accept the 8.5 billion Jamaican dollars, the 53 million pounds. I want to know whether or not this grant, which has been given to us, has occasioned the establishment of a special unit within the government to aggressively ensure that every penny, no, because I don't get the answer. PIOJ has always been there. I want to know whether or not any special unit has now been set up to ensure that this $8.5 billion, we maximize the benefits that is potentially there. Or is it to say that it is business as usual that is going to be pursued in respect to trying to maximize the benefits from this?
Mr. President, I'm not sure if the Senator is seeking to denigrate the professional and technical experts which are employed to the PIOJ and which for years have been conducting this very type of activity within their sphere of competence. The PIOJ circulates to the relevant ministries, developments, departments and agencies. They examine projects, they support, provide technical capacity and support in terms of drafting project proposals where ideas are brought to them, and they address the matter. So I'm not aware of any new or particular unit in respect of this particular fund. It is a PIOJ who works, as it has always done, in the best interest of the Jamaican people.
Mr. President, I won't respond to the point about the need, not that if you set up a special unit, like you set up a new ministry called Economic Growth and Job Creation, that means that you have a problem with the civil servants that existed in other ministries before. It's not often that Jamaica gets a grant of $8.5 billion. But it is often in our country that grants are received and not fully utilized. And my concern is about when you see a grant like this given, as the Prime Minister said, part down payment for the sins of the past. That we make sure. You see your problem, you don't prepare when you come here. I read the speech last night and this morning again, so I know what I'm talking about. Right? So what we're saying, Mr. President, is that this 8.5, and I'm recommending it to the government and ask the minister.
Asking a question, you ask if there is a unit specifically to deal with this grant, and she said no.
So she said
there's none. So
I'm to accept that the government think it's business as usual with the 8.5. Thank you, sir.
Next question.
Let me move on to the next question. Since the government believes it should be business as usual with this, I'll move on. Fake news? That she's telling fake news?
Senator Brown, go on.
No, Mr. President, you can't have Senator Reid, the Minister of Education, Youth and Information, declaring something the minister said to be fake news. Because it couldn't be what I said that is fake news. Right, thank you. Do we accept that what I am saying is what you just say now? That you are saying fake news? Is that what you're saying?
You know what is so beautiful? The kids are here watching, all of Jamaica is watching.
And they say how the Minister of Education behaving.
Just go ahead now, please.
And they say how the Minister of Education behaving. Mr. President, we're told in answer to question number 2, in respect to the UK CIPF, Jamaica has submitted projects. Could we hear from the Minister how many projects? Because this is connected to the question I'm asking earlier now. How many such projects?
How many projects have been? Answer the question, please.
I'm unaware of the specific number of projects which have been submitted or considered by the PIOJ.
And to think that having submitted this question so long, that the people of Jamaica shouldn't be interested in knowing how many projects submitted, when my concern is whether or not we're really aggressively going after this $8.5 billion at a time when we're taxing the people $13 billion more and 8.5 sitting down there that can improve roads, bridges, hospitals. Right?
Come again, Senator Brown. Let's go. Let's move on.
Again, we don't know. Come back to question 1. Senator Hill is in the room, President? I hear a voice sounding like
no,
this.
man. Come on, Senator Brown. Just continue now.
In respect to question 1, we're told that no specific amount has been allocated to Jamaica in respect to the hospitals. Is this to say that we are excluded? Or, because when I think of Cornwall Regional, Savlamar, Princess Margaret, and the multitude of hospitals in Jamaica in need of support, again, I'm surprised that there's no allocation to Jamaica for the health thing. Would a committee, would a special team set up to really look to see how the health sector could improve from this grant, be of help to Jamaica?
Would a specific committee set up?
Mr. President, if I might, the fact is, there's nothing here that says that Jamaica is excluded. In fact, the headline position is that these monies were allocated to Caribbean countries, including Jamaica. The distinction that was made is between the UK SIF infrastructure, the particular infrastructure program, and the health facilities support program, where a particular allocation of £52 million was made. This is yes, 53 million pounds were allocated. That is 18.8% of the overall 300 million was allocated to Jamaica. But in respect of the 30 million provided for the Smart Health Facilities program, there's no specific allocation for any country. It's just a body of funding, and DFID is working with the different ministries of health to examine facilities and allocate as determined as against the audit. So I've indicated that an audit has already started in Jamaica, and that it is intended to cover 100 facilities in the first instance, and I named its parishes within which certain clinics have been given, have been looked at. I don't have any clinic names and I don't have any hospital names, but the program is underway, and when the assessment is complete, then support will be granted under the umbrella fund. And there again, it's administered by PAHO, and the work is taking place as between Ministry of Health and PAHO, who is of course supported by DFID.
Mr. President, I am amazed that with 53 million pounds available to us, 8.5 billion, we still flounder in the dark when we need these resources. Question number 4. Question number 4. Raise the question whether the Minister of Education, former Minister of Education, Senator MP Ronald Thwaites, had sought to get from this $8.5 billion money to build schools. Senator Thwaites has assured me, former Minister Thwaites has assured me that he was moved by a demand that schools are better than prison to go seek schools from this grant. Can I ask whether the government, apart from what former Minister Thwaites did, whether this government has sought to use any of this $8.5 billion to put in schools? I know they've rejected the prison, but can they tell us if they've also rejected seeking schools out of this $8.5 billion?
As indicated in the answer which was read, we have been advised, and the former minister, I imagine, would have been advised as well. Certainly the Ministry of Education was advised that social infrastructure is not covered by this fund. It is not intended to fund social infrastructure such as schools. It is intended to fund infrastructure such as bridges, roads, and irrigation projects, renewable energy projects, and as you pointed to earlier, projects which have been established as having a 12% return on investment in terms of their, in terms of the project feasibility.
12.5 is yours, not mine, because I'd never negotiated that in. But 12. Mr. President, I understand that they have accepted and not sought to renegotiate for schools in the funding, because the Prime Minister spoke glowingly about moving from poverty to prosperity. And I would think that schools are one of the best routes to get to prosperity. But they've not asked for schools. But since bridges are important and infrastructure, could I ask if any effort was made to get funding from this project for the Dunbarton Bridge that was washed away during the flood rains in December, and also the poor Junction Road, on which the students here have had to travel? Because if the promise was for $8.5 billion for roads and bridges and support, then one would expect that instead of taxing the Jamaican people, we could, this is again why I say you need that special unit that go there and say, Junction Road not bad
Senator
way.
Brown, Senate Minister, the question is whether or not any specific...
The concern with the needs in this country with the needs in this country, that we are playing around with the approach we're taking to utilizing this 8.5. And I'd ask you, Minister, if you would agree with me to recommend to the government, as I am now doing, that they need to set up a special committee to look at how we can fast track using these funds. I don't want Senator Hill on the committee. I don't want him on it. He has another good track record. Right? So don't listen to him. But what I want to know is whether or not you'll agree with me. Yes. I want to pick one not to be on it. What I'm seeking, Mr. President, given the needs of our country, you drive around the country, given the needs of our country, given the availability of the money, because it is dear, money is dear. There's no controversy over it or read the prison. The money is there. Would the government agree with me that we need to change from business as usual, set up a special team to fast track?
Senator Brown, with the greatest of respect, you asked that question 3 times, you know.
It is the desire, Mr. President, I did.
You did. You agree with me. You agree with me, though.
I agree with you, but given the reality,
Minister, would you answer it for the 3rd time?
No, Mr. President.
No, but you asked the question 3 times, you know, man.
I am insisting that we set up a fund, a team, to go and get the money and stop taxing the Jamaican people the way we're taxing them. That's what I'm about.
Thank you very much, Senator Golden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minister, I must say I'm a little disappointed that you don't have wanted to ask you whether the amount being sought, how much is being sought for that other project.
I'm actually not quite clear, but I know that they are working on the full feasibility study, etc. So I'm unable to tell you exactly how much is being sought for that one.
Has the government approached this part of grant funding in a holistic way to sort of determine what are the critical infrastructure?
Sorry, Senator Golden. Senator, Minister Reid, you had asked to be excused when the children were leaving. I think they're going there now. And I think Senator Morris might want to, orderly, Senator Morris may want to greet the children outside.
I hope there's students remonstrate. They come from the parts of town, they know the fact.
Yes. I'm wondering, I'm asking a question whether this particular fund was announced by the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in this Parliament as a major new gesture of financial support for the Caribbean and of a significant size. And I must say, in the responses from the Minister, it does appear that the approach to trying to utilize this grant funding, we don't have to pay it back, we don't have to pay interest on it and so on, but the approach being taken by the government to utilizing this 8-point-whatever billion Jamaican, 53 million pounds, whether a holistic approach has been taken to identify how to allocate it across different sectors of infrastructure, geographically, how to apportion it within Jamaica, where the areas of greatest need are, and so on, and how to spend it to get the biggest return to the economy and to the people of Jamaica. It does, from the answers that one is getting so many months after the questions were asked, I must say, it really appears a very haphazard approach is being taken to how to utilize these funds effectively. Not in the sense that due diligence is being done to ensure that the criteria are met by the particular project that is being submitted for approval. I'm not questioning that. But I'm just questioning whether a strategic approach has been taken to how these funds should be utilized. And it does appear to me that is not the case, and that it's a sort of passive approach that's being taken, where the PIOJ sits back and, whichever agency or department or ministry within government wants to try and use this, will try and use it. And I'm asking whether the government wouldn't consider, with a third roughly being left in the pot, 2/3 having been allocated to the Essex Valley, whether the government wouldn't consider a more strategic approach to reusing the residual amount that's available in the fund.
Mr. President, I really, I don't have a brief for the PIOJ or the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation or Ministry of Finance or any of the bodies that manage this matter and others. But I really don't think it's fair to be referring to their work as playing around and haphazard. To say, and I don't agree with the assertion that a strategic approach is not being taken to how the matter is being addressed. The criteria that's provided for, the criteria within which the projects are assessed, are established, and they're not internal to the government. They are established for eligibility, and therefore the government uses them when assessing whatever is put before it. So they have to be of an infrastructure nature. They must be anchored within the CDB's strategic objectives to support inclusive and sustainable growth and development. They must be critical infrastructure which lays foundations for growth, prosperity, poverty reduction, increased resilience to climate change within the Caribbean. And they're being reviewed across the board within the body that is aware of all the other the projects that are at play, so as to prevent duplication and so as to prevent overlapping and haphazard activity. So I really have to say that the assertion that the government is not taking a strategic approach and that there is somehow a lack of focus on these matters, it's erroneous, and I think it's unfair to the persons charged with professional responsibility for these matters.
Senator Golding.
Mr. President, I must say that based on what the minister has put before us, I think it's a very reasonable way of describing the process. All we have been told is that there's an Appendix 1 here which sets out the criteria that's been worked out with the CDB, which would apply to all 8 Caribbean states that can take advantage of this pot of money, grant money, as to how the CDB and DFID will look at and consider whether or not to approve a particular project or a series of projects. What we have not been told is whether there's any overall strategy in the government, guided by the cabinet, as to how this money is to be used.
Was that question put, Senator Golding?
Yes. I'm asking that question. The minister is telling me that I'm denigrating public officials, which I am not, and it's not saying what strategy has been employed in determining how best to use this money, other than the criteria established by CDB. And I repeat, I'd like to hear what strategy the government is employing in making sure that this particular money is used in the best way possible for Jamaica.
If the senator, wishes me to wishes to table supplemental questions to be posed through me to the Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation as to the strategy and criteria being established, I am happy to make those inquiries on receipt of those supplemental questions.
Senator Golding, I think the Minister is very clear that if a question is put, she will take it and get an answer.
Mr. President, I really don't think that should be necessary. This is a matter.
Be the case, but you should ask a question so she can answer.
This is a matter which the minister, as a member of cabinet, should be aware whether or not there's a strategy that the government has put in place for the best use of this money. I don't think I should be asked to table supplemental questions to the Minister of Job Creation, the Prime Minister, on a matter as fundamental to the answering of the questions as that.
I can certainly assure the Minister that the government is always strategic in how it spends and allocates funding in order to achieve the sustainable and inclusive growth of Jamaica. My suggestion was merely, Mr. President, that if he wished details of the strategy being applied to this particular fund, then he could table supplemental questions and I would pass them on to the Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Senator Knight.
Thank you.
Clear the piecemeal.
Minister, for my own edification, I'm not as familiar with these matters as many of my colleagues are.
The Minister is being sarcastic. The Senator is being sarcastic.
No, I'm not.
Previous
No.
Minister of Foreign Affairs.
No, it's not really in the foreign affairs realm. I would not then have made that comment. But I really am not as familiar. I refer to your answer to question 2, and the matter has been raised. I need some clarification. Where you say more particularly, the projects to benefit under the fund must meet certain criteria, including the demonstration of an economic rate of return of at least 12% and strong evidence of being critical to driving economic development. So this is an eligibility criteria. And I just wanted to know, in terms of the 12% rate of return, if you could give me an idea, how is that measurable? And a 12% rate of return, is there some period over a particular period? And is it that if that cannot, Senator Hill, just cool. I'm not asking a question to trick her. So just let her listen.
Please,
Just
come.
Just let her listen.
It's okay. Senator Knight, please just continue.
No, I just wanted her full attention. The minister was listening very carefully. I'm pleased with that. Let's not get, how is it measurable, if you know? And is it that if it is not demonstrated in the, I suppose, project document, that project then would be rejected? Remember the 12%, right? And then you'd have to move on to the selection of another project. And so that is why I believe that maybe some specific projects, if you would agree, some specific projects are selected and that they come under the remit of a special group. My friend Senator Brown refers to it as a committee, because I think, and I hope you agree, that the PIOJ is not really the agency that could go into those specifics. Because apart from dealing with the overall project, the PIOJ does not monitor, for example, and the PIOJ would not make those kinds of projections. So maybe a special focused grouping may be well suited. I don't know whether or not you agree. but I suggest that that would be a good way forward.
Mr. President, I think determining return on investment and rate of return on projects is not unusual activity, and certainly wouldn't be something that's beyond the capacity of the technical teams within the PIOJ or their related units. So certainly, I'm not sure that I can agree with your suggestion or your inquiry, because they both seem to be woven together. That this is something which is particular about this project and should require it to be dealt with in a particular manner. The fact that criteria has been set up for an economic rate of return is not unusual. How you also asked, how does one calculate an economic rate of return? No, that is something which is entirely beyond my competence to answer, and certainly what certainly could be asked of the PIOJ or any other body.
Just to close this off for me, Minister, because of your uncertainty, I would ask you to consider it. You said, Minister, no, not the calculation. Not the calculation. What I understood you to have said about uncertainty dealt with whether or not there should be a special grouping. Well, could you please edify me on what the uncertainties about which you spoke? Because as I understand it, what you were saying is that you do not know how to calculate that, but there are persons who can. So there was no uncertainty about that position. It is about the grouping. But so that is what I am asking, that if there be uncertainty about that, that you give the establishment of a special group some further thought along with the relevant persons.
Just to be clear, Mr. President, what I said was that there is nothing unusual or particular around the requirement for the calculation of economic rate of return or return on investment in the allocation of grant funding, and that accordingly, I did not think there was anything particular about that, which was how you phrased your question, that would require the establishment of a special unit or committee in order to address the matter.
Mr. President? Thank you, Mr. President. Just two quick questions for the Minister. I know that you said earlier that you do not have the number of projects that have been submitted or will be submitted by the ministry. But I wondered whether you could tell us exactly what are these projects. And the second question, Minister, is in terms of the Cornwall Regional Hospital. I wondered whether any focus was given on submitting a project specific to the hospital and to address the issues that we now have at Cornwall Regional from this grant funding, which would not require the government to go and seek additional funding. And the minister in his address, the Prime Minister in his address spoke to the importance of climate change and climate change resilience. And I wondered whether or not any consideration was given to the Negril breakwater and what is happening in Negril Beach. And finally, whether the minister can say what exactly, or what are the criteria, apart from the criteria here that are established by UKCIF, whether the minister can say what were the internal criteria that were used to determine where a project would be implemented, whether it was a particular minister or a particular member of parliament or a particular constituency. I'd be very happy to find out these determinants that guided the project. And I think this question is important because in recent times we've been seeing a trend where projects, bushing projects, road fixing projects have been selected based on particular member of parliament. And I'm hoping that these projects which are funded by grant funding, the UK grant funding, would not be so influenced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. In respect of the first question, I'm unable to answer what the projects are, in the same way that I was unable to answer the number of projects. In respect of the Cornwall Regional Hospital and in respect of the Negril Breakwater Project, I'm not aware if either one has been, if any action has been taken to see if either one could be fit herein. I could make inquiries or you could submit supplemental questions. And I'm unaware of any of the internal criteria that would have been established when pulling together the projects for submission to the PIOJ.
Mr. President, quickly. No, just quickly. That's a continuation in terms of project selection. Is there a mechanism in place where community-based organizations that are effectively run can apply for projects to enhance or develop your communities? And if so, what are the criteria? And is there a secretariat that they can? And if not, why wouldn't this not be a part of this broad-based participation from our people? Or is it that these selection of projects are done solely by the political directorate and in particular the Ministry of... No, solely by... No, Mark, may I ask my question, please? I talk about project selection. Yes, selection of the project. So, for example, in a rural area where you have a citizen association that doesn't have that direct link to PIOJ, can they, based on the needs of their community, apply for some of this fund to enhance a project that will lead to the particular development of their community? And also, finally, in terms of this 12% guarantee, economic guarantee, what are the mechanisms in place to ensure that these projects that will be developing the society, generally speaking, will give you that particular 12% return from an economic perspective? What mechanism you employ? When you're going to develop a project, you expect a certain rate of return. So you must have checks and balances in place to ensure that you achieve what you intend to achieve. It can't be to set a target just for setting it in place and hope to achieve it. You must have a procedure and a mechanism that you monitor during the project, at the end of the project, to achieve the stated objective, unless it would be quote-unquote not achievable as we want it to be. And yeah, and to support now, if you don't achieve it, is it that the UK that provides grant fund, there's some sanction that as a country will meet it on us in future earnings from potential grant funding for the future?
Okay, Mr. President, I'm not aware of any specific path for community-based organizations, but this is not to say that I'm aware that there aren't. I would have to make further inquiries. Similarly, in respect of the monitoring mechanism, which is what it sounds like Senator Skeffrey is asking about, if a monitoring mechanism exists in respect of these projects, I would have to make inquiries, because the fact is that this is at the nascent stage of these projects. The one which has been approved, the only one which has been approved, is stated to launch later in the year. And so I would have to make inquiries, Mr. President, and as I am unaware.
Senator Morris, I would be very disappointed if you didn't ask a question.
Mr. President, a couple of years ago, we passed the Disabilities Act in the Parliament, and a part of what needs to be done for the implementation of this legislation is for government to make the society as a whole, including governmental institutions, clinics, schools, and so forth, accessible for persons with disabilities. I want to find out from the Minister if in the discussions or the negotiations that took place, if any consideration was given to getting some of these funds to assist the country in making that transition to make the society more accessible for persons with disabilities? And if not, is she prepared to make representation on behalf of this community?
Mr. President, I am unaware of any specific action that was taken, but I am very happy to make representation to ask whether such a project could be pursued.
Thank you.
Mr. President, it is not intended to pursue any further business today. Oh, pardon me. There don't appear to be any further questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public notice requiring Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sittings of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business.
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. May I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
Just before I adjourn the Senate, just wish to say thank you very much. We made a start today at 10:15, and I'm going to ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed at 10 o'clock. And I would also ask that members who have, or chairmen of committee meetings who are having meetings before the Senate meets on Friday, to vacate the chamber by 10:15, as is required by the clerk and the standing orders. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed at 10 a.m. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. The Senate now stands adjourned.